So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Singapore International Photography Festival. No matter where you are located in this part of any part of this world, welcome to the festival online programming to connect you and everyone in the community despite closed borders and stay-home notice. My name is Gwen Lee, the director of Singapore International Photography Festival. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this program and to introduce our facilitators, Daniel Boetker-Smith here. And here in these topics on photo books, I have to congratulate again our two winners of SIPF Photo Book Award winner, Poulomi Basu for the best published book in SIPF 2020, as well Maki here, Hayashida, for her book in the best publishing with the best publishing prize. So without further ado, let me just give a bit of like information about Daniel Boetker-Smith and perhaps he is no strangers to us all who are very much involved in Photobook. Well, Daniel holds the positions of Dean of Photography Studies at Photography Studies College in Melbourne, the oldest independent photography educational institution in Australia. Daniel is a regular contributor to the British Journal of Photography, Voices of Photography, Vault Magazine, European Photography, Galt Magazine, Photo Eyes, Photo Journal, Heavy's Wow, and many other Australian and international publications. And for someone who is championing Photobook, he's also the director of the Asia Pacific Photobook Archive, a not-for-profit library of self-published and independent photo book based in Melbourne that travels regularly to festivals and fairs internationally. In these conversations, Daniel will chat with the winners on their photo book, on their practice, and what compelled them to make the books that won the award in this SIPF 2020. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks, Gwen. Thanks for that introduction. So it's a pleasure to be here, and there's lots of things going on the screen, sorry, in front of me. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess just to reiterate what Gwen said, I think it's really a great opportunity to hear from Poulomi Basu for Centralia, the book that won the best published photo book this year. I can hear an echo of myself talking, sorry. Okay, it's gone, thanks. And also Maki Hayashida, whose book Beyond the Mountains won the Dummy Award. So I haven't actually prepared long introductions because unfortunately, like Gwen just spent a long time introducing me, I'd rather get on to the conversation. And I'm sure everyone knows two photographers anyway. I guess what I'd like to say also is that I was part of the judging panel for this prize, which was a great honor. So thank you, Gwen. And I think what was really fantastic was that there was so much work from this region, not just the two books that won, but so much work from this region that was of a really high quality. And there was a number of books in each category that could have won the prize. And I think that's really worth saying also, that even though we have the two winners here, and obviously the books are fantastic, and Maki's book, when she publishes it, is gonna everyone's gonna see it, and it's gonna be fantastic. And Centralia, I believe, is sold out now, so too bad for those people that don't have it, right? But I think it's, like I said, it's worth saying also that there was such a high quality of work, and it's really exciting for me always to be part of these kind of events because it really bolsters my belief in really supporting photographers from this region. And I think SIPF should be really applauded for the work they do, and over many, many years, the work they've done for supporting photographers from this region. And we'll be talking about a couple of other people that have supported these two photographers actually in their journey as well, I'm sure. So thank you, Maki, thank you, Poulomi, for joining us. what I'd like to do maybe quickly, I think this is probably the first time I've had this experience where I'm talking about two books that I haven't seen either of them in real life yet. I know Centralia is on the way to me at the moment. And of course, with the situation in 2020, we were unable to go to Singapore to see the dummies in terms of the judging. So that was all done on screen. So it's kind of a strange situation, this one. And so in a way, maybe I'm in the same boat as all of the audience that will be talking about a book that they won't have seen either. So maybe that's a good thing. So what I would like to do really, and I think there's quite a few overlaps and quite a few interesting kind of parallels and connections between the two projects that I'd like to explore. But obviously they're very different projects too. But maybe what we could do is start with Maki, and just if you can just give us a 5-minute kind of overview of your project, and then I know that we've got some visuals as well. But if you could just talk a little bit about the background to Beyond the Mountains and really the journey up to the point of making the dummy and how long that was. Because I think one of the things that people fail to recognize is that when a book comes out into the world, it's often a number of years of pain and suffering, both physically, emotionally, and financially sometimes as well. So, you know, to produce a book. So, Maki, if you could tell us a little bit about the background to the project and the making of the dummy.
First of all, this is the one piece of my ongoing project about illegal dumping in all over Japan. But as for this, the Beyond the Mountains, it is the story about the biggest illegal dump site in Japan, which is located in Aomori and Iwate prefectures, which is very northern part of main island in Japan. So the illegal dumping was happened in 1990s, and then it revealed to the public in 1999. Then the removal of the waste started in 2004, and it ended in 2013. And in 2014 and 15, the local government planted trees in that area. So my book is, the main part of my book is the landscape of the planted tree, which is from 2016 to now. So this is a very biggest problem about illegal dumping in Japan. And there are many reasons and problems for this incident. So there is one company which did this illegal thing. Yes, the company was bad. And then also the local government didn't stop him to dump legally. So there are also responsibilities for the local government. But what I want to tell is that this happened because of the mass consumption and mass disposal in the Japanese society now. So I don't want to focus on that, either the disposal company or the government. So there are almost no people in this book. And in addition, what is important to this incident is that most of the waste came from in Tokyo metropolitan area. So the waste are from the cities, and it stopped in one rural area, which is next to Tokyo, then came to this northern part of Japan. So I would like to tell the story about where the waste come from. So I when you this is pages of my book, and you see the landscape with the intermediate company. Oh, well, you see, sorry. Well, I started research about this project last year, in the end of last year, and I was trying to go to this place in the spring, but because of the COVID-19, I couldn't go there. So I made this dummy with archival pictures on the local government websites. So I'm still trying to develop this dummy. Yes. Sorry. Maybe.
Great. No, that's good. No, that's
yeah.
great. That's great. Thank you.
The video is kind of sorry.
No, yeah, that's right. We could see the images as you were talking. Okay, great. And I think, yeah, I think that's a really important kind of point to make, is that it is actually images that you've collected from archives from the prefectures where this dumping was happening, right? So the government archives. Yeah. Okay. And I guess we'll come back to that in terms of the discussion about the kind of books and the themes of the books. And I want to talk a bit more about how you kind of put the book together, and maybe reference a couple of your prior projects too. But what I'd like to do now is to get Poulomi to just talk a bit about her project, Centralia, which won the Photobook Prize, and give us a bit of an introduction to that project. And then, yeah, then we'll have a bit more discussion about it as well. Thanks. Are you on mute, Poulomi?
Hi everyone, I'm Poulomi. I'm a transmedia artist, photographer and activist from India. Centralia is a tale of fractured landscape in extremis. It's a portrait of contemporary India, a twisted spin on a classical documentary photography that draws attention to a multi-layered conflict in which everyone seems to lose. Centralia is a passage deep into the forests of central India, where a little and underreported conflict between a Maoist guerrilla army and the Indian state slowly simmers. The work, it's a body of work that uncovers the violent and a largely underreported conflict between the indigenous people fighting under the People's Liberation Guerrilla Army and the Indian state. Mostly shot in central India, Centralia is an outcome of a long-term project focused on this region, but also about the limitations of traditional photography, documentary photography, to expose an overt and multi-layered reality of contemporary conflicts. Referencing dystopian tropes of science fiction, I try to destabilize the conventional linear order of the narratives to create nuanced work that allows a view of a future where current events have reached their climax. To this end, I use a multitude of image types, from cinematic multiple exposures of dark landscapes, staged portrait, and sourced image material, to shocking photographs of lethal crime scenes, testimonies and mugshots of the fallen, often female revolutionary fighters, alongside images of traditional festivities of the indigenous communities. By carefully orchestrating the juxtapositions of this visual material, the book reveals the normalization of violence and the mechanisms of conflict from many different perspectives. The project further addresses wider issues of environmental and climate justice, the role of women often battling inequality on multiple fronts, and the representation of these conflicts in Western societies.
Great, thank you. You've done that before.
I've been working on it for 10 years, so like I'm just
10 years.
You've got it down. That's right. And I guess, look, I guess that's one thing I wanted to start with really was the conversation was just acknowledging the fact that in a way, the two photographers we have here are kind of at two ends of the projects, if you like. You know, Maki's at the start of this project and has been negotiating it through COVID as well, which we all know has been, you know, has been horrible for everybody. And Poulomi almost coming out of it at the other end, if that's what you like, in terms of, you know, this idea of, like you said, you've been working it for a number of years and you know, producing the book, and now over the last, even just in the last few weeks, you know, the Isle Discovery Award, I think it was shortlisted for, it won the, help me out here, it won another prize.
It won the Isle Discovery Award.
It won the, yeah.
It won the, it's shortlisted for the Deutsche Bosch.
That's right, which is amazing. And I think you've also been shortlisted and had a number of grants and things along the way in the making of the project. I think there was the PH Museum in 2018. Yeah. And also, of course, the Dummy Award as well, the Mac First Book Prize that you shortlisted for this project, which was how long ago now? 3 years ago or so.
3 years ago, yeah. And I also got a National Geographic Explorer Award.
Yeah. So I think that's really important to note, is that, you know, in a way, we're kind of at two ends of the spectrum here of the kind of the work being produced in the book and it coming out and spending all that time, and Maki kind of at the start of that in a way. But I guess what I'd like to kind of start the conversation with really is the kind of way that you both use layers in a very kind of visceral way in the book, in a kind of physical way, but also kind of you know, metaphoric layers as well that you're building up. And I know, Maki, for example, in previous projects you've done, I think there was one called Transparent Island, I think it was, which was a similar topic in terms of waste and environment, but I think a different part of Japan. But in that work, you were mixing archival images and your own images together. Is that right? And you were, so you've kind of worked in this way before, and I guess, is that the plan going forward for this project, that you'll be making work and then starting to mix it together? With
mixing is the same, but not the same way to show the archival and present pictures.
And I think because already, and even in the book, that in the dummy that I saw, already you had started to mix black and white images, overlaying them onto color images behind, and you were experimenting with that, right?
For the previous project, Almost Transparent Island, I physically, one side is present landscape and the other side is past landscape, and it with one paper, so you can see the two images together with one paper. That's the technique of mixing. But for this one, I don't want to do that same technique. Or I put the document on the pictures.
And in terms of the, I guess there was for the project, there was a period, I think it was 1990 to 1999, where the dumping was happening, but no one knew about it, and it was only in 1999 that it was discovered. And I guess I'm interested in that, that kind of violence that's enacted on the landscape, if you like, or that kind of destruction and the degradation on the landscape. And then your choice to, obviously it was limited with COVID, but your choice to represent it in a way, these photographs of kind of optimism or kind of hope, or could you talk a bit about that in terms of, because it's kind of a very, it's an interesting approach.
Because I want to show this incident positively, not the negative side. So if it is beautiful or it touching, emotional, maybe more people will pay attention to this incident. If it is very directly, maybe for it is my opinion, but I think more people don't take it serious, not seriously, but not take this problem as myself's problem. So first of all, I want people to see this book as the beautiful mountain book or something. Then you will see the book carefully. You audience can understand what is the story is.
Yeah, and that was certainly the experience when we were looking at the books, Gwen, wasn't it? When we were judging the books, I think everyone was really kind of almost intoxicated with these beautiful kind of landscapes. And then when you kind of read the texts, you know, there's an interesting kind of paradox there, an interesting kind of juxtaposition of the kind of context of it and the images themselves. But I was going to ask also, you said you're not going to photograph people, or you don't photograph people. But I think in another previous project of yours, The Pacific Tourist, which was about a kind of remote island. I can't remember exactly because it's a long time since I've seen it, but it's about a remote island, I think. And it was about capitalism, really, right? It was about people, you know, people leaving the island and actually the kind of population kind of going to the urban kind of centers in a way. But I just don't remember, did you photograph people in that series? Or
no, not really.
Okay.
I think what is also interesting is the fact that when Maki's book Beyond the Mountains, we are looking at this endless landscape. And when people think about landscape, it's always a setting. And these revelations of what settings this landscape brought about became intriguing. And this, interestingly, Maki here says that I'm not interested who's the company, who's the people, but here the landscape is the evidence.
Yes.
More than anything else, because the landscape which cannot disappear from this planet, became the solid evidence to all what had happened. And that's when Beyond the Mountain, the work came out so strong to all the jury member. And I still remember during the discussion, it was quite debated, you know, does it matter whether the image is taken by the artist? Does it matter it's a found image? But I think ultimately the photo book worked primarily with photo image, and there's this working with it that stands out very strongly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's also interesting is, and I guess for the last, I think, you know, Maki and Poulomi and myself caught up a few days ago. And since then, as you do, I've been kind of thinking about both projects in my head at the same time. So I've made all these kind of strange connections between the two of them. And I think, you know, there's a notion of fiction, which I think is really interesting. And in Poulomi's work, obviously, it's, you know, I think you talk about the notion of docu-fiction or reality and fiction. And of course, in Maki's work, it's a fiction, but the landscape is also a fiction because it's a constructed landscape now. You know, they're planting the trees to make it look like there was nothing there that was horrible before. They're trying to make it look beautiful, you know? And so, you know, that's a particularly kind of, you know, particularly interesting for me living in Australia. You know, the landscape as such a site for violence, and also such a history of the hiding of that violence and the invisibility of that violence, but knowing that it's there and it's pervasive, you know. And I think, not saying that Maki's work there's a violence there, but it's a very different violence to what's going on, or what's suggested in Poulomi's work in a way. And Poulomi, I wanted maybe to get you to come in, because I think there was something that I read, or something I heard you saying, where you talked about the project being about an India of the mind, which I really loved. You know, this idea of, you know, reality and fiction, but also the kind of stark kind of brutalness of that too, in some way, in the work. And I just had a few questions really, but I guess one of them really was about, you know, the layers of stuff that's going on in the book and the layers of narratives you've got. I'd like to kind of hear about, having not seen the book, but seen a video of it and seen parts of it and things. You know, how was that process of putting that together? Because there's also I imagine there's a kind of, you would feel a responsibility to this story in some way too. I mean, of course, Maki does too. But I guess a more visceral kind of responsibility because of the kind of the specific kind of violence of the narratives. And I just wonder how you kind of started to kind of think about bringing that book together, and how the dummy was different that you submitted for, say, the Mac First Book Award to the final book that you settled on.
Yeah, so I think for me, what was clear right at the beginning was that I can't have my moral authority on this story as the sole arbiter of truth, you know, or trying to do that, because obviously this particular body of work is dealing with sort of post-truth geopolitical narratives, you know, so we're already in that sort of where facts are manipulated. So obviously you don't know who's telling the truth or who's telling the lies, and in war, truth is the first casualty. So I thought that was very interesting, and that needed to be in the work, and rather than just saying, oh, these are staged portraits, so these are fictional, and this is that. And all that, it's not about that. It's about the nature of truth and how you sort of interrogate those multiple perspectives and collisions. So for me, it was really important that I firstly to have a certain element of, like in Maki's case as well, to sort of have the death of the author in a way, you know, so in a way you sort of bring in other voices into the book. So for me, as an activist, I am used to working with different people and grassroots people a lot in all my work and practice. So for me, it was really important that the voices of the indigenous people who are in the community itself are able to tell their own stories and their version of the truth, you know, of what they think is going on. So it was very clear right at the beginning that I had all these different materials and their voices, and, you know, which needed to be a part of the book, which would make the book multi-layered. You know, automatically, and not just, and me being one of the other, like there are three distinct voices in the book, and I'm one of them, you know, so it's a collision of all three voices trying to tell you the same story with different perspectives. So, you know, I mean, the idea was also to sort of challenge the audience in a way who's very used to seeing digestible stories about conflicts, you know, which are very linear, very sort of, you know, I mean, and the idea was that, you know, it's far from that, because the nature of it is so gray. And similar to Maki's work, like my book also has very strong entry points and exit points where you kind of feel you don't know where you are located. You sort of go through these dystopian, almost science fictional landscapes, you know, where Earth is on fire and you don't know where you are, because I wanted the work to have a certain level of universality that sort of land on fire has, and decimation of land is happening all across the world. It's happened in the past where we've paid a price for progress, whether it's with the Native Americans, it's happening in Brazil, it's happened in Colombia, it's happening in, like, say, Japan. But, you know, and also when you exit it, you kind of exit it almost like into the cosmos. So you kind of escape the place, whereas the people who are in the book are trapped within, you know. So for me, it's kind of really important to make Centralia as a cautionary tale for the future, you know, to show that this is where we are all heading. You know, this is where contemporary conflicts have reached its apotheosis, and this is where we are all headed. So that's how the book kind of became multi-layered. And I work with human rights lawyers, I work with indigenous activists, I work with local grassroots journalists, and I get like a multiple collision of different voices and truths presented through different kinds of design in the book to sort of get those voices to be more pronounced, different from my voices, to sort of tell the story.
And I guess in terms of the landscape, and I guess in terms of the kind of excavation of that place for mining, you were talking about that kind of landscape being somewhere that is it's a capitalist, you know, opportunity, if you like, in terms of that. And I guess the human element of that becomes incidental to it in a way, and is kind of steamrolled over to enable those things to kind of happen. But I was interested in that idea of, you talked, and I guess, and again, it connects back to Maki's work, that idea of kind of environmental justice and climate justice, and is that at the core of it, or is it really these multiple layers are all sitting kind of equally and playing off each other, or is there a kind of grander narrative that you kind of felt like supports everything, which is about the land and about place? Or is it, because it feels like that with the book, you know, because like you said, the start and the end is very much a kind of visceral introduction to that kind of place, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the heart of the book is environmental justice and indigenous rights, you know, but also intersectional feminism, because there is a strong link to the rape of the land and the rape of a woman's body. You know, most people who pay the price in all of these situations are women, and women of color and of certain races, you know. So I wanted that to come across very strongly in the book. And it's also like a part of all my ongoing work. All my work largely has been about women, and you know, it's really important for me to bring sort of voices of women who are sort of pushed, who find themselves in these extraordinary spaces, you know, and therefore challenge their own roles and stereotypes. And here you meet almost terrorist women, you know, who've sort of, you know, the government labels them as terrorists, you know, who have sort of, you know, seen their friends or their families or themselves being raped to no grass left on the floor, their houses being burned down, and therefore they've taken up arms. So there's a direct link between what's happening to the environment is what's happening to the bodies of women as well, and why women do what they do when they're pushed to extremities. So it's really important that indigenous rights and climate justice is connected to intersectional feminism for me, you know, because yeah, this is the core of the work, I think. Yeah.
And I guess and you know, the feeling of going through the book is like that middle part where it is so kind of, it does feel so threateningly kind of violent. These groups of men just kind of milling around in the middle of the book, you know, is really kind of horrible. And I found myself, you know, obviously, like I said, I've only watched it on screen, but I found myself kind of almost not wanting them to turn the page because it was building up to this stuff because of these kind of these perpetrators. You could, you know, they appear as perpetrators in the book, you know, if you like. But I guess I was sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's
there's a sense of threatened violence with these groups of men, right? I mean, that's.
I mean, I use a lot of, like, I'm really inspired by cinema. That's where my background. Like I studied writing, critical appreciation of cinema. So I'm really inspired by, most of my inspirations come from literature and cinema. So they don't really come from photography. So, you know, I mean, I'm always interested in the violence that's lurking within, you know, like Maki's work as well. It's not evident, it's lurking within, like this Lynchian way of, you know, using narratives or using what appears to be banal, but there is this huge threat of violence that's lurking within as really important in my work, you know. But also, you know, I'm influenced by Arundhati Roy's sort of lyricism and fire, and, you know, and activism. And I think all of these things sort of together gave birth to the book.
Yeah, and I think that starting section of the book, like there's, I can't remember how many, but there must be 15 or 20 pages of kind of landscapes and burning landscapes, and there's kind of faces kind of hidden in the darkness, and it's almost kind of it's almost like immediately you feel kind of lost in it, and it's like, well, where what's happening here? And then there's a title page, and it's like, oh, okay, wow, that was just the introduction to this, you know. It's like, it's really intense.
We were quite inspired. I mean, both me and Tian, we're big fans of Werner Herzog, and we're inspired by, like, Werner Herzog's Wrath of God, where you see like Mother Earth, like, you know, like God has like gone angry and Mother Earth is burning, and we kind of wanted that to sort of come across, you know. At the same time, these ghosts, you know, you kind of move from landscapes of burning landscapes to like these alluring forests, you know, where it's sort of dominated by hues of red and yellow and golden, sort of, you know, reflecting into the allure of the forest, and you kind of go inside it, you know. I'm very flexible in my approach. I use multiple cameras when I shoot. I'm not like, you know, I like that sort of madness and that eccentricity to come through the work, you know, and that mysterious, that scare and that fear. You know, I do watch a lot of crime fiction and horror films. So I think all of this goes into what I'm making, you know. And the next thing I want to make is a film and a thriller. So I want to make a feature film, and it's going to be a thriller, you know. So I'm like really excited to sort of expand the limitations of photography, and, like, you know, not to put any rules or limits to it, which is why I like Maki's work, where she's using black and white color. Like, you know, you don't, you know, so, I mean,
it just reminded me, as you were talking then, I think there was something I read about Maki's work where, and Maki, you'll have to clarify this for me, but there was something about, there was two Japanese words, I've got them in my notes somewhere, Satoyama and Satumi.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So it's these two words where it's the landscape and the seascape, but they're the names for these landscapes and seascapes that have been impacted by human interaction, right?
In my world, it touched by human.
Yeah, that's right.
Not too much touched.
Yeah.
Just balance.
Yeah, and so and these just to clarify, I think these words, that's what they suggest. That they suggest that it's a landscape that's been impacted by humans rather than just a pristine natural landscape. Is that right? Or not? Am I reading it wrong?
But it's very positive word for co-living with nature.
Yeah, it's a positive word for it. Okay, I see. All right. Okay. Yeah, because I think that was something that I was thinking about when, again, thinking about both the projects, this idea of kind of creating a new language, because you've talked a bit, Poulomi, about the idea of the limitations of photography. And I think I get that sense also in Maki's work, that obviously there was limitations this year because of not being able to go and photograph. But even the way you've done projects previously, though, Maki, in terms of, you know, using data, using maps, using text and all those things, and not to say that we're talking negatively about photography, like it's not good enough, but almost just recognizing, okay, there's other things here that can help us to tell these stories.
Yeah.
And maybe Maki, you could talk a bit more about that in terms of the stuff. Obviously, the project, you know, the Mountains project is new, but the idea of using kind of data and using kind of information on top of the work as well, is that something that will be happening in this project too, do you think?
Yeah. Yes.
And I like that you've done that. You do that in a visual way too, which I think is interesting. You know, it's not just it's not just the data, but actually is juxtaposed and overlaid, and it's thought about kind of visually in some way.
Yes, and I wanted to show that official document from the government that is on the left side. This one too. So this is the planning document for the restoration of the land. It is very difficult document, but I want to show it like a visually, so that people can pay attention to what this map is.
And I like the end of the book, you also had where you got the images from. So you had like the source for each picture, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, but it's conclusion, not conclusion, it's answer to my book.
And I wonder, Maki, is in your work, is there a sense of frustration or anger? Or I think something that Poulomi said in one of her interviews was about the scale of the crisis or something, or the scale of crisis, and the way that you kind of represent that. And I just wonder, with your works, Maki, is there a kind of frustration or an anger or or being exasperated by, because obviously, you know, you're choosing these kind of stories that you're telling, and you've told a number of them already about the landscape and environmental kind of degradation. I just wonder, is there a kind of burning anger in the center of that?
For
frustration?
me, for what?
Yeah, for you, like what drives you to make the work?
Because I love the rural areas of Japan, and I wanted to keep the nature landscape, so I want to protect it. But I live in Tokyo, and I feel kind of bad about what the city people do. So yes, I feel kind of sorry for the rural areas in Japan. That make me to do this project.
And are there kind of activist projects that you're part of or that exist in Japan in terms of this area? Like, is that something that that happens, or are you trying to spark that activism by your work?
So could you?
Are there? I mean, the question is: are there kind of groups? Are there groups of people that you're involved in that are actively kind of dealing with these kind of places and kind of trying to raise awareness about the situations that have happened and all those things?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay.
No.
So your work is very important then.
Yeah, you're a lone warrior.
Because less people pay attention to this incident lately. It kind of past incident. So
yeah, interesting. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, after you.
It can't make money, so people don't pay attention to this.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important for all of us to know.
And Poulomi, I was just going to ask, again, having not seen the book, but I guess just the use of text in your book. I know that there's quite a few moments where there's text kind of interspersed through the images, but then there's also a block of text in the book on blue paper, which seems to be kind of news stories or something, or stories taken from different sources. Could you tell us a bit about that and how you use text in the book?
The book sort of starts with 2 poems that I have written in the beginning and in the end. And again, at that point, you don't know where you are. You just sort of, there's one like that in the beginning and there's in the end. And it's not until you hit really the center of the book that you start getting the context of what is going on, and that is a chunk of interview that I did with a local journalist who I've been working with for the last 10 years.
Okay.
And he's my so I wanted his voice to come through quite powerfully, and he gives you like the dark side of journalism in a place like this, with the ironical sort of role of journalism in a place like this. And it's really fantastic, the text, I think, and it sort of comes in the middle of the book. But besides that, there's also like a variety of texts. I also use like a film script when I'm trying to use which talks about police brutalities. That's sort of right at the start. As soon as you hit Centralia, when the prelude is over, you find this text that talks about like an activist, an army guy, a local villager, and they're all sort of interrogating the nature of truth, like who's telling the truth, who's telling the lie, the brutalities. So, all of these things happen, and it's like a different use of text, but the core of the story of this place comes through in the center when you sort of hit the center of the book. So, otherwise, it's fairly sort of, I've tried to make it sort of as universal as possible. But again, there's also indigenous texts that I found from the guerrillas when I was in the forest of the women martyrs of the revolution, the guerrillas or the terrorists, as you would call them. And
is that the pictures of the women that is printed on thinner paper?
Yeah, it's printed on like thin, fragile paper, so kind of like it's a thing of it's quite feminine and thin, but it's also like a memory, so and these I've collected them from the forests when I was in the forest, and the English is not perfect in these texts, but it's so beautiful because it's their way of writing. They probably want to translate it and like keep it ready to give it to people if they meet, and it's like the idiom of that village local sound it has. I remember my publisher was like, this is not right English, we can't publish it. And I was like, you can't impose your idea of language over indigenous people, I mean, that's again a very colonial way of thinking, and we can't, absolutely not, even if it doesn't come across as right. I mean, so these things are very important for me. So yeah,
and it just adds to the adds to the layers of it too. I guess, I mean, Maki talked a bit about, and of course with Maki's work, again, she's at the start of the project, and she talked a bit about the kind of public perception of these kind of topics in Japan, and I guess, Poulomi, for you, I was just wondering about what conversations or responses you've had that have been outside photography in response to this work, and
Well, I've had a great email from Arundhati Roy saying that she
that's
thinks
nice.
it's an evocative, and for me it was like a big thing, like
That's
thing, because she inspired me to go and do this in the first place.
amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing, but she's also told me I have to be really careful. Like if I give up my Indian passport, the government will stop me from coming back to India. So, because as long as you have an Indian citizenship, they can't stop you. But if you give that up, because we can't have dual citizenships, you know, and I live in the UK. So for example, if I became a British citizen, India will completely stop me from coming back because of this work. So, and obviously it's very difficult to show in India. Nobody will want to really show it because, you know, it's just going to like stop, you know, no one will want to show it. So I'm trying to get it to be shown as much as I can outside. I mean, the book sold out in 2 months. It launched in January and it sold out in March. So, which is a huge surprise that people would have appetite for such a complex book. Because when I first did it, I was really discouraged by people by saying this is not a traditional photo book, you know, this is interesting, but you know, and most of them are obviously white people, and they used to being presented a certain type of narrative or what is their dominant idea of a photo book should be, which is very Eurocentric and very sort of, you know. I was trying to break away from all that. So it was, I mean, a lot of people told me it's not going to work, you know. So it's really about sticking with your vision and just going forward with it. Because I feel that there are people who understand and who will understand your vision and will be able to, like, you know. Because photo books are meant to be complex. Like I'm kind of bored by, like, I like the idea of like 50 pictures in a book, which is beautiful, but it's a kind of photo book, you know, and who's here to define what it should be anyway, you know?
And I think that's what's been great, I think, over the last kind of 5-10 years really, is that, you know, places like Singapore Photo Festival and Chobi Mela and Angkor and lots of places where they're running kind of workshops and for photographers from those countries and from those regions. But what's happening more and more is those workshops are being run by photographers from this region also. That it's, you know, that model that was happening kind of 15-20 years ago, where, you know, it'd be the European kind of white male photographers coming to Asia and doing workshops. That's not happening so much anymore. Actually, it's much more photographers from this region running workshop in this region. And you know, we've talked previously about Yumi and Goto at Reminders, and I know that you have both, Poulomi and Maki, had very positive experiences with Yumi, and has, you know, she's been integral to your kind of careers. And I think, you know, the same with Gwen and with Singapore, you know, that notion of starting to run these events where photographers from this region are nurturing and mentoring other photographers in the region. What you've just said, Poulomi, is exactly what happens, is that the narratives start to be produced that are much more relevant and complex and interesting to the stories that are being told, or relevant to the stories that are being told, because you have this kind of feedback kind of process or loop or something that's happening, which is really interesting and exciting to see, you know, and really rich in terms of storytelling too. And I think all those things, you can see all those things in your book as well. You can see the European influence, but you can also see other things happening as well, you know.
I mean, especially for me, I think, I mean, there are a lot of radical people in sitting in Europe as well, and it's really important you don't close yourself to those experiences.
No, of course.
And you know, there's radical people everywhere. You know, you just have to align yourself with those people and find them and let those influences come into shaping your work and your vision, you know. So I think I am very much sitting in the middle, where I let both sides allow, you know. So I'm going to close myself saying this, but also I have to be open to the fact that if I'm from a certain country and region, then my aesthetics are mine, you know, like in the sense like this is this language, people in Europe have to be open to it because it's their ideas, not their language, you know, it's my language. So, you know, it might be a new language, you know, to present that. So that's why I sent the dummy to the Singapore Award. I knew that, you know, people in these Western awards are not going to get it and they will immediately like, you know, I just knew it, you know, and the feeling I had, you know, so that people at Aperture all will just like, they'll be like, oh, you know, so I was I'm going to send it to to the Asian, you know, to the Singapore Photobook Awards because it's just something that you know, in like 10, 15 years of my practice and living in both parts of the world, it's just,
Okay, I think, thank you very much. I think we have some questions, Gwen, from the audience. It's really disconcerting because we can't see any audience, so it's like we're just talking to ourselves, really, which is fine. So, Gwen, all these things you've written down here, are these all questions from the audience, or is it just the last one? Sorry. Oh, she's nodding. I'm not sure. Okay. 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 So the question is, who would you like the books to be seen by? Yeah.
Well, my book is really aimed at sort of a middle class audience, you know, that are far away from these places and realities, you know, and also to the Western audience because a lot of people, multinationals and people, the money comes from the West to be pumped into a lot of these mines and places, you know, where the sort of progress is paying a price. So my audience is a Western audience actually, and middle class Indians. So that's my audience. I mean, my audience is not photobook people in a way, like in a sense, like it's thinkers, literature people, you know, other people align myself with that movement, you know. So I'm not aiming my work at like other photographers or just the art world. I think it's also towards people, you know, I mean, it is an elite audience I'm aiming my work at. Not just say my work is not aimed at the indigenous people themselves, because I can't give them a dose of what they know their life is like. Hello, I've made this work, and you like show it in your community. Like, you know what their reality is. Why would they want to like get a taste of that, you know? We want this to be out to people who don't know how they're living and what's going on. So, yeah.
And Maki, how do you, I mean, obviously, again, you're at the other end of this sort of starting point of the project, but I guess what do you hope for the work to do, or who would you like the work to be seen by, or the book to be seen by?
Mainly international audience, in particular who have interested in Japan, because in general, Japan shows only beautiful part of our country. So I wanna tell not the only beautiful part, but also negative side of Japan beautifully, maybe. That's my point, and what I'll do is my book.
Yeah. And I guess I'm not sure what our time is like, Gwen. Do we have time for more questions? No?
No.
Okay. She's shaking her head vigorously. Okay. So, okay, well, this leaves me to then thank Maki in Tokyo and Poulomi in London. And thank you for joining us. And I must say that it's Saturday evening here. The future is great. Just so you know, Saturday night is fantastic.
Thank you, Daniel and Gwen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
thank you, Gwen.
Thank you, Poulomi. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you to our audience also who joined us. As usually this is a dinner time, but yet we have many people tuning too. I know that we as a speaker cannot see, but this dialogues will be actually later on be edited and will be circulating on our festival websites. So thank you again for sharing the insights, the purpose, and of course, in every photo book is unique, and that comes with it a very clear intention and purpose why make the photo book. And thank you for sharing us with your work. And I look forward to the new published book by Maki next year. And I look forward to many more new projects coming for Poulomi. Thank you. And thank you, Daniel.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening.